hearing this morning in regards to the Department of Commerce and also the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. First, are there any bill introductions this morning? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the first item on the agenda, and that is going to be a informational briefing on the Department of Commerce. And so I would invite Rachel Willis, the Director of Legislative Affairs, to address the committee. Rachel?
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Rachel Willis. I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Department of Commerce. It's a pleasure to provide you with an update about all of the things that our agency has been working on over the past year and take a little bit of a historical look as well. So in your packet, the second slide should just be a preview of the things that I plan to cover this morning during the presentation. We'll go ahead and jump right in. So slide 3 talks about the unprecedented levels of economic success that Kansas and our agency and partnering with you, the legislature, we've been able to see since 2019. So we've been able to secure $21 billion in committed private business investment with a little more than 70,000 committed, created new jobs and retained jobs. Of course, these numbers reflect that Kansas is being built in every region of our state. The following slide, this is a snapshot here if you go back to about the last 15 years. So you'll see this really remarkable trajectory since 2019. This includes, again, most capital investment of any state in the nation for 2 of those years, and overall resulted in the most successful years in the history of Kansas's economic development. Slide 5. Our job numbers, right? So these fluctuate a bit more, especially as we continue to land those big next generation projects. So we've added a huge number of more modern types of jobs, especially since the pandemic. A lot of jobs in distribution or with heavy forms of advanced manufacturing or automation require fewer and more highly skilled workers to operate. Those are most of the jobs that you'll see here and that you'll see for the future. We're focusing on getting Kansas into these lucrative, high-growth careers through a number of our key workforce pipelines. We know we have open jobs right now, and we'll continue to create new jobs that add strength, resiliency, economic diversity, and sustainability to our state's economy. We believe we're future-proofing Kansas, and the workforce is a key piece to those things as we're modernizing and changing. So those types of projects we're seeing landed here in Kansas. They're all good jobs that all pay good wages, and even if the total volume of new positions is lower than in the past years. All right, so we'd be amiss not to share some of our awards that we've been fortunate enough to receive. So it is clear we are no longer middle of the road. We're punching well above our weight, and with the folks across the country and around the world are taking note and investing in Kansas to arise with their dollars and their futures. There's no doubt that we will remain open for business in the years ahead. So we have won 4 consecutive Gold Shovel Awards for area development and 2 Governor Cups for most private sector investment per capita. And those years were 2021 and 2022. All right, slide 7 is a snapshot of what we believe to be our pipeline of future wins. So currently, we have about 135 projects in our pipeline. Which is more than the number of projects that our team has ever worked in the past. And they fall under a diverse array of industries. So we'll continue to generate lots of interest in advanced manufacturing professional services and value-added agriculture with a steady and robust pipeline of aviation projects. And then the rest kind of sprinkle out there, and hopefully you can see that a little bit better on your own handouts. So as we continue to really implement our Framework for Growth, which is our strategic plan, so this is Framework for Growth 2.0, we'll continue to focus on these target sectors: advanced manufacturing, aerospace, distribution, logistics and transportation, food and agriculture, food processing, value-added agriculture, professional and technical services, biosciences and animal health, and advanced technology and renewable energies. Also wanted to take a minute to highlight what we consider our top 3 economic development wins. So we'll start with, on page 8, Hilmar. So they've invested $676 million there in Dodge City. They're still hiring people to date, but they've hired approximately 200 employees. They're expected to hire about 50 more, which would make their total employee count there at that facility 250. Hilmar started receiving milk in October of 2024. They're actively making cheese, but should be in full operation by mid-year. Some of the dairies that are providing their milk are still not at full capacity, so they're together getting online and reaching that full capacity. This has really been a catalyst for several additional large projects down in that Southwest region, including 3 dairy expansions, as one new dairy with around $150 million in investment, which doesn't include the dollars that they spent on the land or cattle. And this kind of additional projects outside of Hilmar Cheese includes 340 jobs in that region. We've also seen, because of this, 2 feed yard expansions, some significant expansions in that region, with another 80,000 head feed going into Pawnee County, so again in that region, as well as a few feed mill expansions, again, all as a result of Hilmar Cheese choosing Dodge City. Next up is Amber Wave. So Amber Wave invested right at $232.5 million in Phillipsburg. Their headquarters is in Ames, Iowa. This is the largest wheat protein plant in North America. It added 60 new jobs, and it has a total of 110 employees. It's interesting to note that all their wheat is grown within 100 miles of that facility. They produce gluten-free products for commercial bakeries, food ingredient plants, alternative meat factories, pet food processors, and specialty feed companies. They use the latest technology from their partners in milling, that wheat protein extract, and renewable biofuels. So again, just a really catalyst project for that region of our state. Now, the last one that I want to talk about, of course, is Panasonic, but I will note that those other 2 projects within themselves, had we not been successful in working with you and landing Panasonic, those other 2 would have been record-breaking for us, right? So it was a matter of coincidence and timing, but those other 2 projects are significant growth in our economy and for that particular time. So as you know, Panasonic is our largest economic development project in state history. It's got $4 billion in capital investment, committed 4,000 jobs. Their first battery is to be produced later this spring. They have hired, as of January, right around 400 employees. Their plan is to scale up to about 1,000 positions by the summer, and wanting to scale up to 2,000 positions by the end of this year. Their first wing is operational, and the second wing construction will continue through next year. So an interesting statistic about the site is that here at this site, there in DeSoto, they will be able to produce 66 batteries per second, which will support right around 500,000 vehicles per year. Some of you, as we have gone around and had the pleasure of doing our annual reports, have been able to hear about the local benefits that DeSoto has received because of Panasonic up until this point. And I just wanted to draw your attention to that again as well. So by investing in an already budgeted $2 million for road improvements, DeSoto is poised to see a return of an estimated $400 million in combined infrastructure, educational, and community benefits. This will be over a 20-year period. There's been significant investment or return on investment in exchange for forgoing $70 million in property taxes. DeSoto and the Northwest Consolidated Fire District will receive over $250 million in essential infrastructure upgrades, which is a return in itself of more than triple that investment. During the 20-year incentive period, local schools have received $14 million in property taxes, and the state education will receive $35 million in property taxes. So those are just a few, and DeSoto does a great job on their website keeping folks up to date as far as that project and the benefits that local community is receiving. Lastly, I'll mention that the very last bullet on that slide, so slide 11, Panasonic's presence has already energized the DeSoto retail environment with retail sales activities in the past year exceeding the previous year by 128%. So those are retail sales, which has then enabled them, the local leaders, to lower property taxes by 30%. So as our agency thinks about our growth and economic growth, we really believe in the holistic approach. And so you'll see a list of various divisions and programs that are run throughout the agency that we feel like all aid in our ability to be successful in recruiting and expanding and providing support and services for small businesses. But it really takes that holistic approach, all things moving in the right direction, if you will. I did want to talk just briefly about our international division. Sometimes our international division is more behind the scenes than out front, but they're doing really great work. And since 2019, we've worked diligently to rebuild this division. Just this past year, so 2024, the division conducted 11 trade missions, hosted 10 delegations, and supported more than $13 billion in Kansas exports. So in some of those trips and those visits, we have been able to cultivate approximately 91 new foreign direct investment projects or meaningful leads that the business recruitment team and the international team are continuing to work to date. With some of our different shows that we go to, we've been in front of anywhere between 200 and 500 businesses throughout the year. I'll go back just a second. So on this slide, specifically slide 13, you can see our top 5 exports and our top 3 trading partners. And then slide 14 talks about some of the new goals that our international division has as they really start to focus and build out our work related to exports. Next up is apprenticeship. So the Office of Apprenticeship really has continued a significant growth trend, jumping 10 spots as we look at the rankings of offices of registered apprenticeships across the country. We're now number 29th in terms of new total apprentices and following that statewide increase of about 27%. So we were able to increase participation in apprenticeships by about 27% last year, which is great news for our workforce pipeline. Our Office of Small Business Development and Entrepreneurship. The point that I wanted to significantly highlight here is that recently this office was successful in procuring $2.6 million from the U.S. Treasury State Small Business Credit Initiative. So this funding will provide targeted financial support, help small businesses access capital, expand their operations, and stimulate the economic growth as it relates to small businesses and entrepreneurship. So while we've established a new office there, it is important to note that almost all of our other divisions and programs provide support and assistance for small businesses across the agency. I won't spend too much time on this particular slide, STAR bonds. We've had lots of really good conversations about STAR bonds in the last couple years. The program was established in 1999. We have 17 projects Current projects, we have about 11 more in the pipeline. So Star Bonds is really booming for us. One specific example I will mention is Village West. This has been the most successful project to date. It now provides over $40 million in sales tax to the state general fund every year. As we continue to think about our economic development and our ability to recruit and expand businesses, these are our 3 guiding principles. So speed. Speed is really the new initiative, right? Everything is moving fast, just like this session. So we got to keep up, and that's our top goal. The next is quality of places. So this is really talking about your local communities, right? How can we improve that? How can we make them thrive? How can we make sure that they're offering all the things that you would want for your families? And then last, of course, but not least, is talent. As you know, we need more humans here in Kansas. So we'll continue to work on strategies there to make sure that our pipeline is robust as we move forward. The last 2 slides in your packet talk about AIM-K, our new bill, HB 2308, which would create a new economic development tool. This will be up in House Commerce today, so it's just a little bit of a preview of what that bill looks like. And these then again highlight some of the current projects in our pipeline related to that specific tool. So. Happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Rachel. Actually, I have a few questions, then I'll turn it over to the committee. So you had mentioned earlier in your presentation that there were 105 projects in the pipeline. Is that correct?
There's approximately 136.
136, okay. I don't know where I got 105, but okay, 136. And what predominantly is the type of industry that is prevalent in those 136? Is it, I'm sure it's varying between all different types of industries, but is there one that just seems to be more prevalent?
Yeah, so it's, thank you, Chairman. It's that advanced manufacturing. So obviously that captures a lot, but advanced manufacturing is the primary industry that we're seeing the most interest from. And
are any of those projects as large as the Panasonic project that we secured?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Okay. And then I guess just what would be the percentage of capturing some of those projects of the 136 that are possible?
Yes, that's a really good question. As far as what is our success rate on kind of those average number of projects per year, let me find out for you.
Okay. And so, last week we had a presentation that was done here by ks 2026 and talks with the World Cup. And they were talking about from the Kansas City metro region, you have a 250-mile radius as far as individuals that will be looking at hotels or staying or traveling or whatever the case may be. So has there been any outreach with ks 2026 or a partnership by the Department of Commerce in trying to promote tourism throughout the state? So when we have, what do they say, 600,000 people coming into the Kansas City metropolitan area during the 3-4 weeks of the World Cup, is there any partnership to try to promote tourism outside of the Kansas City metro area and other parts of the state?
Yeah, thank you. So yes, that's definitely at the top of our mind for our tourism division as we look out over the next year, 18 months here. Our tourism division has been included on a variety of different committees from ks 2026, but I don't think there's been any kind of maybe solid like marketing outreach strategy or plan developed at this point.
Okay. And the next I have, we actually had a provision that was put into the budget bill in regards to an extension on Star Bonds with Mattel. Mm-hmm. And can you give us any type of update in regards to that amusement park resort? Yes,
so it's 100% viable. It's just taking a little bit longer than what we would all like. And we continue conversations and to continue to really push them to make sure that they understand the opportunity that lies ahead related to World Cup coming and their prime location. So we're hopeful that they will be up and ready to welcome visitors. So.
Okay, and then you kind of talked about the changing the subject in regards to the aircraft industry. And in the last couple of years, we've put a lot of resources into the MRO project. Is there any status on how that is progressing?
Yeah, so we can work to kind of get an update. I know that Salina, with a recent changeover in their leadership on their airport authority, may have slowed things down. But we think that there's good work there, and those, again, are viable projects. Because
in the last couple of years, we've invested, what, $80 million into the MRO project and have yet to see a product?
Yeah, I can work and see what kind of update I can get you.
All right, thank you. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rachel. So when we look at the committed, new, and retained jobs, can you tell us what percentage of those are retained and what percentage are actually new, or maybe what percentage are actually first-time Kansas tax filers?
Rachel.
Yes, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Yes, we do have that number broken out. I don't have it with me today. I can absolutely get it to you.
Okay, you promise, Rachel.
I do. You know that I'm good on it.
Okay, because the reason I bring that up is because our population in Kansas is pretty much flat. It's growing at about 0.57%. Some years it's actually negative in the last 5 years. So it's hard to actually believe that we're recruiting 70,000 new employees that weren't already Kansas tax filers, and that we didn't just shift those jobs from one business to another business. So that's always a concern, and we have asked for that number last year, and so I will eagerly anticipate that number. And then my last question is really about exports. If we adjust for inflation, can you tell us how exports have either increased, decreased for manufacturing and non-manufacturing goods in the last 5 years?
Yes, I can get you those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Helgerson.
Thank you very much. I have two questions. One, you made reference to the amount of money that's being returned by one of the Star Bonds areas. Mm-hmm. Can you give it the list of what's the return on investment for all of them, or projected, or if we're still in the hole? Do you have that information?
Mm-hmm.
Rachel.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, so for all 17 districts, I can provide you the amount of bonds that have been issued, where they stand now, so how much has been paid off, and how much each of those districts generate in sales tax for the last 4 or 5 years.
And let me expand that a little bit. Mm-hmm. The chairman mentioned about the money that went to the aircraft and what's been returned or not returned. Can you do that for all the projects? I think the vice chair had talked about that at one time, having a website. Where is that possible that you can do?
Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple thoughts. One, going back to your Star Bonds question, all of those numbers are available in our annual report, as well as visitation numbers. So I can make sure that you get that. And then, yes, as far as economic development dollars provided at the state level, most of that information you can find now on our transparency database. So you can search by project, you can search by your particular district, and see those dollars that have been offered, and then how much has been claimed and how much has been, or how much is remaining. So that information should be on the transparency database, but I can pull it for you and send it over.
The second question I had, yesterday we had a hearing about the idea that's being proposed both in the House and the Senate, that we take a percentage of increases that are available in our state general fund, and to dedicate a percentage of that toward lowering the taxes for sales and for corporations. Several of the individuals that spoke in favor of that said this is necessary for economic development because we are lagging behind states both around us and throughout the country. I got into a discussion with one or two of the individuals and said, why is it that the governor puts out regular notices that we are the receiving, what was it, silver shovel or something like that? And every few months I'd have a press release sent out about what a great economic development job we're having or we're doing. But yet they listed that continually, that we needed to dedicate funds to improve our standing, to bring in business and to expand existing business. No one from the department, I raised that question, no one, they refuted it in some way, but no one from the department was there, and maybe someone was listening. It would be helpful if the department would decide how they're going to respond, or the administration in particular, on that issue.
Rachel.
And you don't have to answer it now, but in trying to balance the dedication of funds for their tax reductions or for the many enhancements that you asked for, would you do a comparison or have somebody do a comparison? Thank you.
Rachel.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. They're gold shovels. No. Yeah, so I don't know enough about that particular bill, but I can work to see what our response and what the administration's position is on that particular bill. We do know, and we can show you how much growth we have seen since 2019, and we really believe that it's been through a partnership with the legislature to, enhance our economic development tools when we've needed it, and to respond to some of our requests and be true partners as we've worked to really grow the state. So we're excited in that momentum. We wish to continue it. That's why you'll see us working with Chairman Tarwater and Commerce on this new bill for a new economic development tool. So those continue to be our priorities.
Representative Helgerson.
Used to be approximately 10 years, up until about 10 years ago, we had a group called Kansas Inc. Kansas Inc. wants to independently look at the economic development issues in Kansas and to give us guidance as to whether or not to lower taxes or to put out more funding through Commerce or anywhere else to get the tools in order to expand Kansas. That was eliminated, but that's the kind of analysis I'm looking for. Thank you very much.
Representative Bueller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rachel, for being here. So I'm looking at slides 4 and 5, and the Vice may have touched on this a little bit, but do we track net job creation or loss? So what I see is new and retained jobs. I'm assuming somewhere there is a net job loss by year. And so I'm curious of what the state's overall position is in net job creation, either plus or minus. Do we have that information?
Rachel.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I can absolutely get you, and I know that we've recently, if not last session, provided kind of that breakout between new and retained jobs per year. So I can pull that again. As far as net jobs, I think we would have to work with the Department of Labor to pull that information, because we're not always necessarily tracking some of that data.
Yeah, I think for me, if I may, Mr. Chair, that would help me kind of get a better picture understanding for the state's overall business climate. I know anybody has to invest in and try to grow business, but at the same time, if we're losing at a faster rate than we're adding, then that adds a whole new set of challenges for us. So thank you if you get that information.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Rachel. Question for you regarding the slide on the Kansas International Division. Showed a 2% increase from fiscal year or calendar year 23 With inflation at 3%, though, that looks like we're losing ground. Am I missing something here?
Rachel?
Yeah, so I don't have those numbers as far as calculating it with inflation, but I'm happy to dig into that and find out for you.
Well, yeah, I would think it would only be accurate if we're comparing apples to apples.
Of course, of course.
All right, thank you.
Representative Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rachel, for being here. I saw in the news recently that there's a potential highway project or an expansion of Highway 10 around DeSoto to take it to maybe 6 lanes, and that would cost over $1 billion, maybe $1.2 billion. Is there any conversations that you're having with Department of Transportation about how that would be funded or anything like that? Thank you.
Rachel?
Thank you for that. That's a great question. I'm not involved in those particulars, so let me go back and see what I can find out.
Well, and I would suggest that most likely it would probably be part of the Ike transportation plan if that was going to be expanded from a 4-lane highway to 6. And I'm assuming that it's from pretty much the Lawrence area all the way into Olathe into Johnson County. But that would follow into the transportation plan that we currently have in existence. Representative Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going back to the KC 26, so my understanding is that the Department of Commerce and KC 26 have made an agreement, have come to an agreement on how the money is going to be dispersed. And so can you kind of explain a little bit how that's going to work, what the agreement is, and how that money is going to be dispersed as far as how do people know where how to get it, who do they contact, and that sort of information?
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the agency created an agreement with KC 2026, largely similar to how we would create any of our other kind of grant agreements. So, you know, it's got a budget, it's got a timeline, it's got reporting requirements, those sorts of things. As far as how communities and others can access that money or partner, they're going to need to work directly with KC 2026.
Okay. Can you get us a copy of that agreement?
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I will work with our legal department to see what can be released at this point.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, I would think it would be able to be released to us. We're the ones that funding it. So all right. I appreciate that.
Representative Ballard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the slide that says Kansas is on top. And hearing some of the questions that you've asked, it seems that maybe there's some question about whether or not Kansas is on top. But I'm looking at this picture up there holding the cup as to who presented it to them. But how is this rating? If we look at number 1 in U.S. economic growth, and we're looking at on the top, how do we get this rating? We didn't give it to ourselves, did we?
Rachel?
No, ma'am, no. So we work through, so it's the Area Development Council that provides these awards. And so just like any other award, you have to fill out that application. They track your progress. You provide all sorts of data and statistics, and then they compare it to other states across the country.
So you say they're compared to other states across the country. All right. So if we look at this page, number 1 in manufacturing, top 5 best places to live, number 1 in region best business climate, credit rating, AA, top 5 in U.S. highest ratio of renewable energy, and we go on and on and on. If we look at this and it's given by an outside source, they have seen something perhaps that allow them to do this rating. So I would sort of say all the stuff that I've heard, those things come into play. But I would say based on this outside source getting this, Commerce is doing its job and bringing in jobs and retaining jobs as well. Would you agree?
Rachel?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I don't see, all right, Representative Amix, sorry about that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Rachel, thank you for all the information today. I do have a question, though, and we're talking about something was brought up about the new and retained jobs, and you can provide information to us. My question, I know that you have information on how many people that we are retaining that are coming out of our institutions of higher learning. I know that we're spending a lot on all of our areas of education, but, you know, if we're not seeing increases in population, are we keeping the people that we're helping with education? So if you could provide information on those numbers, I think that would be great.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you, sir. So I know as the department had started to dig into our Love Kansas campaign, which was a marketing strategy that we had developed to target what we called boomerangs. So those folks that maybe had grown up in Kansas, maybe had gotten their education and then had left for a bigger city or a fancier job, how do we reach them and convince them to come back? And so through some of that research, and I think this number is old, so I'm happy to confirm at least and provide you with some new data. There was about 16,000 students that we were losing, graduates, out of our higher ed on an annual basis to other places across the country. So as we work through the Love Kansas campaign, we have partnered with all of our higher ed institutions and are working through their alumni lists in the regions that we have found based on our data and research that have high populations of young Kansans that might be interested to know that we've got some of these really great jobs now here in Kansas in their local communities. There's lots of new opportunities, so we'll continue to work to market to those folks and hopefully bring them back.
Rachel, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, and kind of going off of Representative Amix's question in regards to, you mentioned the Love Kansas campaign, and there were some items that was discussed, I'll say the word discussed, when we had the EDIF funding. And, you know, actually last evening, Chairperson Mosier and I were talking about the EDIF table and the funding and everything in regards to the Department of Commerce. And we were going to make some adjustments. Obviously, the Senate has made a major adjustment in regards to the EDIF by just basically stripping everything out of it. But I just implore the Department of Commerce to go back and look at some adjustments that could be made in regards to what you receive through the EDIF funding and see exactly how we can better equip the Department of Commerce in regards to the dollars that is allocated from EDIF. So I just implore you to, you know, work with Chairperson Mosier because we will have those adjustments in our bill that we'll be looking at probably next week. No, I preface with just minor adjustments in regards to the budget. But there are, you know, I had a meeting with the Lieutenant Governor last week and we had talked about the EDIF funding and how that would better benefit the Department of Commerce and also Kansas.
Yes, sir.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to revisit the 2026 thing. You made a statement in answering the question that any expenses we'd have to go to FIFA 2026 to get them approved. Is that what you said?
Rachel.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative, no. So if you're looking to partner or you want access to additional dollars, you're going to have to visit with KC 2026. The Department of Commerce doesn't have any funds, dedicated to the World Cup or to provide other communities or organizations with dollars related to any sort of project for the World Cup.
Representative Tarwater.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, so this is kind of a new revelation because we've all along, I think the reason we put the money in your department was to kind of make sure that it was there for when the unified government comes to us, for example, or the city of Lawrence comes to us and wants increased funds for their police force because people are overwhelmed. And we had this money earmarked for the FIFA fund. I just don't want to be in a situation where we turn around and our police departments are underfunded because FIFA decides they have a better way to spend the money, then we have to spend more money than what we've already allocated. Want to make sure that we get credit on how much Kansas is putting in versus other states, because that seems to be a thing. And if you recall, we spent $10 million in the facility there the year before for FIFA, but they somehow don't count that as money that we spent for FIFA. And so I want to make very clear that any money spent on FIFA will go through that account, and we're not going to give additional funds for increased police force. It's already in there. There was a line item for security. And so that line item, we need to watch and make sure. We got to find a better way to do this. We can't just have our municipalities going to a third party to be funded when we've already put the money somewhere to do so. Mr. Chairman.
Rachel, do you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Representative. So the funding's going to KC 2026, right? So that's the organization. Lindsay made her presentation last week or the week before about their plan and how they're going to use those Kansas dollars and how we're tracking to make sure that those Kansas dollars are being used for things here in Kansas. And so they're the ones, since they've got the vision, right? So they wrote and won for us to be a host for the World Cup. They have the vision. They are in charge of the by-state overall plan on how to make this successful. And so yes, the local communities will have to work with KC 2026 to receive those funds and fit into the plan.
But you had mentioned before that the Department of Commerce is going to be handling this like you do any other type of investment towards a potential business with reporting and requirements that need to be met. So in regards to Representative Tarwater's concern, in the reporting, is that going to be reflective on making sure that communities are not losing out, I guess is the best way to put it, in regards to law enforcement or security that is going to be required for the World Cup?
Yes, so KC 2026 is required to make reports and demonstrate how those funds were used specifically in Kansas. And we have emphasized the importance of those dollars staying in Kansas so that we all can see what's being done, how they're using it, and how can we get our biggest bang for the buck. So, yes.
Okay, and I would probably also contend with Representative Tarwater that we need to ensure that until June of 2026, when this event actually occurs, that we need to have a scope on the money and how it's being allocated, where it's being allocated, and for what. And so I would suggest that we probably have numerous interim committees when we're out of session to monitor exactly how the money is being spent and making sure that the money is being spent in the state of Kansas and not going to Kansas City proper or into Missouri. Representative Tarwater.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. I would even go a step farther to make sure that we help them budget it, because these municipalities will come to this committee for funding for increased security and possibly infrastructure, and our answer is going to be, shouldn't have to be, you have to go to a third party for that, and good luck. I do have one more question.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you, sir. In regards to the same thing, we've got a few weeks before the first game, we have the world's largest softball tournament that comes to the Overland Park area every single year and fills up all the hotels. They are struggling to find hotel rooms because all the hotels are looking forward to the FIFA. And we have gotten the Top Gun tournament people that come every year that are, other states are courting to move the tournament out. And it's a lot of money for the local community every year. They need help freeing up hotel rooms for a few weeks before the tournament. And I know that FIFA is, and the Department of Commerce might even be contracting with hotels. We would like to figure out a way to free up the hotel rooms so that we can keep that softball tournament in town each and every year. Because while FIFA is a big deal, this tournament comes every year and it fills up all the hotel rooms. So can you help us with that somehow?
Rachel?
Yeah, so let me look into it. I don't know off the top of my head. I know for fact that the agency's not contracting with any hotels or anything during that period. But let me have a conversation with KC 2026 and see what their plan is. Because I would also imagine that this specific example that you mentioned isn't isolated, right? We know that there's a lot of sports tournaments, youth sports tournaments that take place in the Kansas City region. So how can we accommodate all?
Representative Tarwater?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do know that Top Gun and FIFA have had discussions, and I believe that all FIFA would say is they can't help because the hotels are the hotels. But maybe get some messaging to the hotels that says these people aren't going to come that early, and it'd be okay to rent your rooms to somebody else for that time period. Thanks.
Representative Rogers?
Thank you. Rachel, you must have had your second bowl of Wheaties. You probably weren't expecting this line of questioning this morning, but hopefully folks that you work with are listening and we'll get some answers. I want to talk a little bit about tourism. Tourism folks are coming later this week to the Capitol and be talking to us. And as we go through this, we know there's been some changes. We also know that there have been, efforts to try to bolster tourism, especially with, again, the topic of this morning, evidently, and the big celebration in 26 and so on. Yet it seems like Commerce isn't as committed to tourism or trying to communicate. That's what I'm hearing from folks out in the country that are encouraging people to come to their communities. What can I tell them?
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Representative. And I'm sad to hear that. I think that our tourism division is one of the best in the country. They just won another national award for Destination of State here in 2024. So I know they're doing outstanding work. I think that through our budget conversations and knowing that the agency was going to have to take a reduction and wanting to be a partner in that conversation so that we could prioritize or at least communicate some of our priorities related to our agency work. I think that Sunflower Summer app or program and some of those things, folks in the industry have been disappointed. But I will tell you this, that it was a very difficult conversation, right? As you try to figure out where within your agency you can take reductions or decreases in. And we felt like we had to really protect our core work, which at that time was also protecting our core budget for tourism, right? So we had the tourism budget and then we had a budget for Sunflower Summer program. And then adding in the fact that, we didn't necessarily know how sustainable or how long-term the Sunflower Summer app or program, I always call it an app because it's an app, but it's a program, would be. We felt like at that time, it made the most sense for us to look at a way to still operate that program in some capacity with a limited budget, just like we were doing with lots of our other items within our division and our budget. And so that's what we did. And like I told the subcommittee and like what I've told Senate Commerce as we've worked through the budget on that side, just because the agency has prioritized things and said, this is where we could live with a decrease does not mean that there's a decrease in value or that program is less important or doesn't have value, right? It's just very different times than what we've ever been in, right? And I was fortunate enough my first couple years working with Commerce just to come to you all with a long list of enhancements, and that's not been the case this year, right? Like we're talking about any sort of increase, and so. Yes, there were some difficult conversations, and I know that some industry folks within tourism were upset, but we felt like at the time, and we still believe so, we had to protect our core and find a way to still run that program to some degree, and that's what we did. So,
Representative Rogers.
Okay, just to be clear, I think your director of tourism, I think she's doing fine. I think that's fine. I mean, we cut the Love Kansas situation, I think it was 1.6 million to try to help and try to work. So I think it goes beyond tourism. It goes to a different level. And, we have this great, shiny, and it's great. I mean, I'm glad you're doing a lot of projects, but part of that also is tourism, because tourism is also a big economic driver in the state. And I think in trying to work together from the administration to the legislature and trying to find common ground in how that very successful summer program, because again, those entities run by our constituents who bring us here. And so we also listen to them because they know the success, but also understand the constraints we're under. And so how, if we make it shorter, if we do other things, and to really gain the most value for those dollars. And I just think as we look forward, greater communication with the appropriators might be appropriate. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Any further questions for Rachel in regards to the Department of Commerce? All right, I'm not seeing any. The only thing that I would implore again is, working on those EDIF numbers, like the meeting we had last week in regards to how we can help tourism and the other programs with EDIF with the Department of Commerce.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rachel. Next, we're going to have a discussion on the state housing update. And so I would ask that Ryan Vincent, the Executive Director of the Kansas Housing Resources Corporation, to address the committee. Good morning, Ryan.
Let's try that. Does that sound better? Thank you for having me on this blustery Tuesday. Thank you to Rachel for softening you all up for me this morning. Do appreciate the opportunity annually to come speak with you and just kind of update you on the happenings at Kansas Housing as we work together with you all and many other stakeholders to unlock home across our state. I've got a brief presentation, and then I'm happy to field any questions. Mr. Chairman, I may just ask how long I have. I wasn't sure how late this committee goes.
We go until about 10:30.
Oh, okay. So plenty of time then. Thank you. I realize that many of you have gotten to hear me several times at House Commerce Committee. I see Chairman Tarwater over there. My apologies to you for hearing some of the same material. But, this is important, and it's important that we come before you as the appropriators to make sure that you understand the investments that you're making on behalf of the state in coordination with us, but also the impact of some of the funding decisions that you make on the communities and the partners that we serve. I realize also that some of you may not be familiar with Kansas Housing. We are celebrating 20 years as a public corporation. We do everything from administer housing programs as well as community programs. We work with bankers, with lenders, with realtors, with communities, with federal, state, local partners, with economic development groups, with nonprofits. If you live, breathe, pay taxes, or need homes in the state of Kansas, you're a stakeholder of Kansas Housing. I always like to remind you that even though we are not a traditional state agency, we are a partner with you all. We are a public corporation. We're governed by a board of directors that's appointed by the governor, that's confirmed by the Senate. KHRC reports regularly to this committee as well as several other within the State House. Our annual reports and our financial statements are on our website and always available to you all so that we make sure that we are open and transparent and good partners to you all. As far as the range of programs that KHRC administers, I very much encourage you to check out our website, if not just for your benefit, but for your constituents. We serve Kansans in all of the different varieties of their housing needs. We fund homeless shelters and domestic violence centers. We provide funding for vital partners like community action agencies around the state of Kansas. We provide tenant-based rental assistance. We finance actual housing development, which I'll primarily be focusing on today through tax credits, through grant funds. KHRC administers a first-time home buyer, a down payment assistance program. We administer weatherization funds through Department of Energy, some of the state's LEAP dollars, as well as some private utility dollars. And we also have a healthy compliance department because we ultimately want to make sure that the funds that we spend are spent well, that they're serving the people that they're intended to serve, and that we are good long-term neighbors to your community. So go back a couple years here, and for years, I'm going on 20 years of Kansas housing, I've always heard about our state housing problem. And quickly, we've seen our state housing problem become a crisis at various times that I've come and talked to you. This is when we have a tornado in Greensburg. This is when we have flooding in southeast Kansas. This is when we have an economic mortgage collapse, or when we have a COVID pandemic hit. If you have an underlying shortage of quality, affordable housing in rural and urban areas alike, that problem can quickly escalate into a crisis very quickly. KHRC is so thrilled to finally be making some real progress and success addressing that underlying housing problem and not just responding to housing crises. And it's because of the investments you all have made. But it started with the statewide housing needs assessment that happened a few years ago. We worked with stakeholder partners across the state in all of your communities. We had public surveys, we had community meetings, and we came up with a study that had both quantitative and qualitative data. The things that the study found won't be a surprise to you all because you're hearing it from your constituents, your communities, your realtors, your bankers, your government officials. It's things like we need to add or free up more moderate income housing. These are households that make too much to qualify for the the federal low-income housing resources that are available, but they don't make enough to actually be able to buy a home, to be able to rent, to be able to build. We also need to diversify our housing stock. The days of being able to just build single-family homes and to meet every constituent's needs simply are not realistic. We have an aging population. We need more accessibility. We need different types of housing product, whether it's multifamily, duplexes, single-family, you name it, we need it. We need to extend housing security. We're actually losing more affordable housing in our state than we've been putting back online through disinvestment until the last couple of years. We need to address the building trade shortage. All of these things have been piling and leading to our state housing problem that I spoke about earlier. As you have time, I very much encourage you to check out our website. Even though the study is a couple years old, we do have great data on your community, on your region, on different goals and strategies and examples of best practices. But we didn't just let this study sit on a shelf. We didn't just let it collect dust. We took it to you all and had great conversations. We talked with our stakeholder partners. And one of the things that we really captured in this housing study, and I've got a screen just showing, is the annual number of homes needed across our state to meet our needs in rural and urban areas alike. Just in our rural areas, the state housing study showed that we need between 3,800 and 4,800 homes per year just to meet the needs of our employers, to meet the needs of our communities, to meet the needs of our schools and our healthcare facilities. Before these new resources passed, we were able to produce about 50 homes a year through the moderate income housing program and about 1,000 homes a year through the the federal housing tax credit. That was about 1,050 homes a year we were putting online when we were needing nearly 5,000 homes. And again, this is just in our rural areas. As an example, the city of Topeka did a local study showing that they need about 720 homes per year. We've got data that we need about 100,000 homes in aggregate for our persons making less than $50,000 per year, 100,000 homes. From 2018 to 2023, Kansas rents went up 31%. Mortgage rates went up 29%, mortgage payments. The costs keep going up, and that's why there's our gap kept growing, again, until we got the new state housing development resources passed by you all. In 2022, we received $62 million for our moderate income housing, or MIH program, again, to serve that workforce housing level of Kansans. We received 2 new tax credit resources, the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit, also called the State LIHTC. We simultaneously received a Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit called KHITC. Lots of acronyms, all different pots of money that we as your state housing finance partners were able to work with different communities, different developers, different builders to make sure that the needs were met, that the housing was being built, that our communities were being served. 23, 24, we received some additional revolving loan funds that I'm going to touch on, as well as moderate income housing. Before I go on, I should kind of address the elephant in the room, and that's that right now our Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit has been passed through the House, has been discontinued. And I touch on that partially because I'm not going to focus a lot on that because we've had extensive conversations in Chairman Tarwater's committee, and we're going to be having some of those on the Senate side. I'll briefly touch on it. But just so you're aware that the major resource for housing development in our state, the state housing tax credit, under the current legislation would no longer be funded. So of course that's going to put some additional pressure on the other tools that I'm going to be touching on. So I'll be primarily talking about the MIH and the revolving loan funds. So let's talk about where we're at with the moderate income housing program. That particular program, we have already allocated and awarded all of the 2022, all of the 2023 funds that we received. We've been able, just through those various rounds, to fund several thousand new homes, specifically in rural communities. Just in 2022, 41 developments, 12 home ownership, 26 rental, 3 combination. Another 776 homes using $20 million in MIH in the ARPA money, 13 developments, 4 home ownership, 9 rental. Your actual, and I believe I've got a map here, which I may just go ahead and jump to, but you can see that each round we were able to fund additional housing homes across Kansas in communities that haven't had new or even rehabbed homes financed in generations sometimes. I'll get to a map here shortly, but let me just touch on, so that was MIH. Let me talk about the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit. That's a $13 million annual credit that's awarded for qualified housing investments. KHRC has had great success getting that program launched. Brand new program, and yet we were able to couple it with the existing moderate income housing program. We've been able to award $41.3 million since that program was funded in 2023. In addition, that last pot of funds that KHRC has been administering since you all awarded the funds a couple years ago is a revolving loan fund. That revolving loan fund has come up in conversation in this committee the last couple years. The initial challenge with that program was that by statute, it was restricted to cities and counties, and they had to borrow the funds. The idea was great. The idea was that it would revolve, that we would be able to lend out the money to cities and counties. I'm not used to getting this many cheers as I speak. This is great. Thank you for thank you for bearing with me as we work through this. The challenge, though, with that specific legislation was that the bill restricted us because of the cash basis and banking laws in being able to easily lend funds to cities and counties. You all heard us last year. We worked with the administration. We worked with the legislature. We got some technical cleanup passed on that bill. And since then, we've been able, just in the last 6 months, to award almost $6 million to 9 different developments through that program. These are communities like Hayes, Wamego, Carbondale, Edwardsville, Great Bend. And we've got applications in Norton, Larned, Gridley, Humboldt. These are communities, again, that may not have seen new housing investment in generations. We've got different models. We were able to do construction and permanent loans on rental properties. We've got short-term loans to bridge gaps for historic credit equity, single family, to be able to kind of bridge the time that it takes for single family homes to be sold. We're also able to even serve kind of that middle band, again, that moderate income band of Kansans. So we're pleased to get that resource launched. At this point, we understand we have about $27 million because a portion of the funds were actually rescinded during the last legislative session. So where are we now? I draw your attention to this screen for one reason only, to show you the difference between what we have been able to invest in your communities for your constituents since we got the new state housing development resources. Our production has gone from about 1,000 homes per year to almost 5,000 homes. That's huge. You can see the number of counties served with multiple investments. Your communities, whether it's single-family housing in Dodge City, whether it's fourplexes in Hillsborough, Bel Air, or Abilene, these are real dollars for your communities. These properties pay taxes. These homeowners and renters are able to move in. There's now jobs for our employers to be able to go home to at night. That's absolutely essential for our revitalization of our rural and urban areas alike. Big numbers, and I'm sorry, I'm actually correcting myself. I guess it's actually 6,700 homes that we've been able to do since these new state housing development resources. And I point out that the total development budget for just what we've financed to date is $1.7 billion with a B dollars. Yes, there's a significant investment, mostly through the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit, but we are also leveraging untold amounts of federal resource that have been returned year after year through that program. We're leveraging private employer dollars, local community dollars. We are now leveraging multiple different resources to be able to get these homes built and to be able to really unlock home for those we serve. We are celebrating these successes around the state as we speak. Here's just a couple screenshots from Stafford County, from Wamego. I personally was able to attend the development. It was a historic hospital that had sat dilapidated over the years, and yet there were memories in this rural community of this hospital. We were able to partner with the community. We were able to use some of your moderate income housing investment to be able to bring this hospital back to life, to be able to be part of their downtown revitalization, to be able to reinvest in a rural community that has economic growth and job success. We are thrilled to be a partner in that, but we also recognize that if we continue to decrease the amount of available funds for state housing development, that will have a toll on the resources that we have to provide. I bring that up because the moderate income housing program that I mentioned has about $6 million left. We have one more funding round this round, and then that program has been zeroed out for this next year. Traditionally, we received at least $2 million under the EDIF fund that you heard about through the Department of Commerce, but that too has been zeroed out. I know that you all as policymakers have some really tough decisions to make, and I don't envy you of that, but I do want you to be aware that if there's a perception that KHRC is sitting on a pile of resources that are yet to be awarded, it's not realistic. The only resources we would have left, assuming the Kansas Affordable Housing Tax Credit is zeroed out and the Moderate Income Housing Program is zeroed out, would be the Kansas Housing Investor Tax Credit at $13 million per year. Sounds like a lot of money, but that does not go very far statewide, and that particular program is restricted to rural communities. Again, don't envy your jobs. These are tough policy discussions, but we do want you to be aware that the resources are very limited. At the same time that we're competing with virtually every other state in the nation, with developers, with builders, with contractors, we've made amazing headway getting these partners, these stakeholders to come back and build in our rural communities. If we pull that resource out underneath their feet, as they plan out the next couple of years, I can almost guarantee you they're not going to be planning to be doing work in Kansas communities, whether it's rural or urban alike. This is a map just showing our tax credit neighbors. Virtually every other state has some kind of affordable housing tax credit program. And lastly, just a reminder that our challenges continue, that none of this happens in a vacuum, that whether it's high interest rates for first-time home buyers, whether it's the realization that we're going to be paying for housing one way or the other, our dollars, in my opinion, would be better spent creating safe, affordable, accessible housing supply. But if we don't fund it, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be providing emergency services for persons experiencing homelessness. Just in Douglas County, a couple months ago, there was a report saying that for every person unhoused, they were receiving $7,000 in emergency services per year. I'd very much encourage you from an economic standpoint to invest on the front end and build the homes so that we can address so many of our society's needs. That's a lot of information. I very much encourage you to sign up for our different newsletters and funding announcements. We so much have appreciated your partnership the last couple of years and look forward to continued partnership as we work together to address the state's housing needs. Mr. Chairman, happy to address any questions.
All right, and thank you, Ryan, for being here and giving us an update. I mean, obviously, something that we've always heard in this room are, you know, three constant things ever since the pandemic, and that is economic development, child care, and housing. And the three kind of intermittently go together because it does drive economic development. That's why we wanted to have you here today with Commerce to talk about economic development and how housing is a big part of that.
Thank you.
So going into slide 4, you have, I'm assuming this is an acronym for HOME. What does that necessarily stand for?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm just trying to remember which one slide 4 would be.
Right there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so that is actually the
It'd be
federal.
like right in the middle, the second line item. It says HOME in all capitalized letters.
That's a great question, Mr. Chairman. So that's actually the Federal Home Investment Partnership Program.
Right.
That is funded through HUD, and we receive an allocation that's divided a couple of different ways. KHRC finances down payment assistance through the first-time homebuyer program. We also get a portion of those funds that we're able to finance actual housing development, but it's restricted to households 60% or below area median income, so fairly low income. But with that, we are able to finance housing developments across the state, as well as provide some tenant-based rental assistance. So that's the three different uses that KHRC uses those home funds. On that note, though, there is a realization that as the federal government is increasingly tightening various programs, that particular program is very much at risk. So, you know, if we have a multi-legged stool that we're relying on to be able to finance housing development in our state, we're quickly getting most of the different feet knocked out from under us, and the federal resources are very much at risk.
Right. So going on that, so Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac probably finance 95% of the mortgages in the United States. And so if we have somebody in the state of Kansas, like, for example, the first-time home buyer program, if they want to utilize that, how does your office partner with them when they're getting a mortgage through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac?
Another great question. So KHRC actually has a network of participating lenders around the state. This particular program only serves more rural areas. We serve what's called the balance of state. And the reason for that is that entitlements, the metro areas actually get their own home funds. But we have a network of participating lenders around the state. So KHRC has that relationship with your local lenders to be able to get them knowledgeable that this resource is available. As a person who's wanting to buy a home, they work with their realtor, they work with their local lender. The lender provides the first mortgage financing. KHRC goes in and provides a second subordinate mortgage on the home. As long as that homeowner commits to live at the home for a 10-year period, that subsidy, that down payment is actually forgiven. So it's a wonderful way to get people back into rural communities. A very successful long-term program, but again, very much one at risk given the future federal funding.
Okay. So my next question is, and we had a discussion about this, actually it's in our budget that's over on the Senate side, and after some consultation with the state treasurer's office, it's come to realization that these dollars cannot be used for the purpose that an outside agency had thought or entity had thought it could be used for. But, however, we have money that is sitting over in the state treasurer's office in regards to housing. And it's basically, it has to be funneled through a banking institution, but those dollars can be utilized. My question is, since this percolated even before session started, with this outside entity wanting to get into the housing, and actually we pulled some of that money back that they were asking for because you have a home loan revolving fund. I don't think it was prudent that we set up another one. So how do you work with these outside entities in regards to housing and some of the needs that they were wanting to address by creating their own revolving fund?
And another excellent question, and that particular group, the Innovation Center, we work with very closely. We meet with them regularly because we define our stakeholder network very broadly. We want to make sure that we are aware of the different initiatives, that we're aware of local housing needs, that some of the value that we as the State Housing Finance Agency bring are that we know the right partners in the various area. We know where the resources are. We know the unique situations of some of these different regions of the state. That was fascinating in the housing study to see the similarities, but also the differences between our different communities and our different regions. So in that example, we actually were able to finance some housing in Norton along with the Innovation Center that has some different initiatives going on. We're able to work through our programs directly with the municipalities, whether it's the cities or the counties. And yet they're working with the Dane Hansen Foundation or some of the different partners. It's important that we're all talking, and that's something that we've come so far in the last decade. As an example, the Department of Commerce that you were just heard from, there was a disconnect for years. We weren't talking to each other and we were in silos. The big changes the last few years have been now that we're sharing information with each other. So when we get a moderate income housing application, we're able to give a list to the Department of Commerce of the 45 different applications that we got this round. The Department of Commerce is able to go through that list, and they're able to identify which communities have economic development needs, which have job growth, which have new employers wanting to recruit. We're able to get their feedback and incorporate that into our evaluation of the MIH program. And that's important for you all to hear, that we're talking to each other, that we're learning from each other, that we're having these internal conversations so that you're getting the best bang for your buck as far as the state tax dollars.
All right, thank you. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so has KHRC taken an overall inventory of the housing stock in Kansas?
Great question, Madam Vice Chair. We actually have, and that inventory is in the state housing study. It's what we have is an inventory of the different regions across the state. Our study primarily focused on the rural areas because we do have local data from the different metro areas. But as we receive different applications for our programs, we're actually able to get the copy of those different market needs assessments because that's important. We want to make sure that as we're fielding applications that we're funding the places that have the greatest job growth, the greatest housing need. So we do take that data, whether it's our data, whether it's local community market needs, or whether it's the census data that's available to us to make sure that we're making informed decisions.
Representative Williams.
Thank you for that. Well, I think most of us, we can go through any neighborhood, especially in rural areas, any community, and see a lot of blight, a lot of homes that are either abandoned or not being utilized or are falling apart and in disrepair. And I feel like in our housing plan, we're not really addressing those issues as much as we are trying to build new apartment complexes or new homes that that are going to be rented rather than allow those individual homeowners get into a home. And I will cite a specific example, which is Habitat for Humanity, which it costs about $100,000 or $110,000 to build a home, sell a home, provide a no-interest loan for someone. And we're not, I feel like we're overlooking these opportunities rather than, and exchanging them for giant, apartment complexes. So the inventory for me is really important, understanding what is out there, because I do believe we have a lot of inventory and it's getting wasted. It's deteriorating to the point that it's not going to ever be salvageable. So that is, I feel like, an untapped area. But my next question is, how can all of this how does this square up with the realization that since 2000, U.S. migration report showed that we're losing almost 200,000 residents in Kansas over a 25-year period. So we're getting small increases or negative increases. We're pretty much flat, but over a 25-year period, we have lost almost 200,000 residents. So if you take that into account with our deteriorating homes that are coming off of the market, there is a huge disconnect in what's going on. I'd like to see if you could respond to that.
That's a thoughtful
And I
question.
might have a
There's-
segue on that question too, so go ahead and answer it.
Okay,
I'll
and
ask
there's a
mine.
lot kind of embodied in that, but I'll attempt. Totally agree that we've been not only losing population as a state, but that we need to make sure that we're aware of the diverse housing needs across the state. Again, going back to our housing study, a single-family home isn't the answer to every housing need, but neither is a great big multifamily complex. The reality is that some places need different types of housing product, and that's something the KHRC is aware of in our investments. We work with the Habitat Humanity chapters and affiliates around the state and have a great working relationship. They've been utilizing our down payment assistance program for single-family homes through the home program we mentioned. They also been partnering with the moderate income housing program. So these partnerships are working to address, and I can assure you that in a Norton, in a Iola, we're not building great big multifamily high rises. We're making sure that we're meeting the community's housing needs. But ultimately, going back to your second question, Madam Vice Chair, I would assert that housing resources are a key component of reversing the trend that you observe. That for years, through disinvestment in our housing stock, which has resulted in vacant properties, dilapidated housing, when we were only putting as a state 69 cents per Kansan per year into housing, that our gap, our supply dwindled, our gap grew. We need housing for jobs. We need jobs for housing. We need housing for rural revitalization. We need housing for the redevelopment of our inner city communities too. But it all comes down to resource. And we've made amazing headway the last couple of years. But if we don't have that resource going forward, we're just treading water. And that's my only caution to this committee, that we believe that economic investment and development pays for itself, but housing has to be a component of that.
No, I would agree. And so going off of the Vice Chair's comments, and obviously, someone who represents 5 counties that are all considered rural, this is something that I see all the time, is vacant homes within our communities. Dilapidated, that could still be having somebody living in there. So that's, the eye of the beholder on whether they think it's dilapidated or rather I think it's dilapidated. But as far as vacant homes, which there's many in the communities that I represent. However, it's also a sense of local control where the city, if they want to take the step of demolishing that home, there's many steps that have to be involved because there is property owners involved. So does your organization partner with cities and helping them with the process of acquiring that vacant property and then and rehabilitating it into a functioning home?
Another great question, and Mr. Chairman, that's key. Making sure that it's not just about resources, that it's about local ordinances, zoning, and just all of those different facets that affect the ultimate housing supply and our ability to develop to meet the housing needs of a community. Yes, we do work with cities and counties, and that's the beauty of the moderate income housing program that you all fund. We already have that infrastructure. We already have those partnerships. Because our funds can not only go through the city or county, we've been able to really build up those relationships to be able to provide some of that technical assistance that some of these particularly rural communities really need. Because we know that a Johnson County or a Sedgwick County have the resources to have a large staff that are very familiar with maybe housing development specifically. But we also know that there's some communities that don't have those types of resources. As we are able to build up our housing programs and resources and offerings, we're able to build up our liaisons with communities to provide those services so that they're not so dependent on a grant writer, so that they're not losing out to these larger communities that have more funds and capacity. We've been very diligent and very thoughtful to make sure that we're spreading the resources as efficiently and effectively as possible. But it's a real challenge to make sure that we're meeting not just the resource need, but we're providing that type of information. KHRC every year has a statewide housing conference. We have 750 attendees that come to that every year. So we make sure that we have sessions on zoning and ordinances and how to incentivize housing, not just the resource piece. We also provide compliance trainings and fair housing trainings. So we're really trying to address those holistic needs of our communities and of our citizens.
Okay. Representative Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your work. You know, I, in my private life prior to this, was a recipient of a MIH grant, so I do understand the need. But one of the things that I see that's somewhat concerning on this, if I did the quick math on your MIH grants, it was almost anywhere from $25,000 to $40,000 a home that we're subsidizing, which from my experience seems somewhat excessive. What are we doing to make sure that our local communities are our partners? You know, we need a good toolbox so that we can do things. But, you know, we have RHIDs, we have assessments that communities can implement to help pay for some of the infrastructure costs. So again, going back to the other tools in the toolbox, it seems like that subsidy is excessive. And what are we doing? What are we doing about it? Why is that number not excessive?
I appreciate the thoughtful point, Representative. And, you know, at one time I would have said that number was excessive. It's amazing how much costs have gone up to construct the last even 5 years. At one time we were averaging, I believe, about $20,000 per unit for moderate income housing. And like you said, that number is now probably $40,000, $45,000, depending on the area, depending on the product. And there's a lot of factors going into that. One is that we hear you all often say that we encourage single-family homes. And that's great. We understand there's a need for single-family homes, but we do need to realize that single-family homes cost more than duplexes or multifamily properties. We can't get the economies of scale, particularly in rural areas, without being able to build some of those different housing products. So we're aware of that. But the beauty that comes with Kansas Housing as the state housing finance agency is we are able to be able to review dozens of applications every round to be able to make sure that the different applications have the right utilization of RHID or the different pots of funds, but that we're also controlling cost, that we're making sure that not only are they utilizing available sources, but they're also not, they don't have too high of a developer fee or too high of a construction costs, that they've maybe explored a different design or a different product. So that's the expertise, the benefit that we bring as a state housing finance agency, but also with great partners around the state. It does take some technical wherewithal. And the beauty of the MIH program specifically is that we're able to bring our next generation of builders and partners up to speed. So we've given MIH grants to Sterling. We've given them to Alma. We've given them to a couple of very small communities to local builders. Those builders built, they did great work. They've done amazing work in the community, and they've expanded their operation. They've now done some tax credit development. So because of your resources, we're able to leverage those resources to actually get more homegrown developers and homegrown builders, which is something particularly our rural areas have really needed. So thanks for the thoughtful question.
Representative Francis.
Well, I would still say that I think with the other tools in the toolbox, it seems like we're taking an inordinate share of the partnership there. I think when we did ours, we got $8,300 a unit, not anywhere close to 20. But the other thing that I would like to have everybody remember, we may have a lot of housing in the state of Kansas, but it also can't be functionally obsolete. You know, there's a lot of homes across the state that for one reason or another, they're not considered what people want to buy now. I mean, you got to have somebody that wants to buy it regardless. You may have bathrooms that are too small. You know, you may have serious foundation issues, no garages and things like that. So I think functional obsolescence also affects our housing stock. Thank you.
Representative Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. on your fifth slide, which is Kansas Statewide Housing Needs Assessment 2021, one of the goals is to free up more middle-income housing. How did you define, in specific numbers, middle-income housing? And then I have a follow-up question, if I may.
Thank you, Representative Estes. Specifically on that question, middle income was defined using the federal definition of the affordable housing programs, which is 80% area median income or below. So it's serving individuals and households that make between 80% up to about 150% of area median income. As an example, for a household of four in so let's just say Sedgwick County, that would probably range between maybe $45,000 per year and $150,000, $140,000 per year. So that's a big band, a big income band, and you can imagine there's a lot of Kansans, whether it's, again, urban or rural areas, that would fit within those moderate income housing needs.
Representative Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And specifically, how do you free up middle-income housing?
Another thoughtful question, and you guys are here. I thought Rachel had softened you up, but I don't think so. But you know, one idea is to actually build more affordable housing for low-income households, and I can explain why. What that does, well, let me reverse that. So if we're actually able to build more moderate-income housing, again, that's for that middle-income band, that's going to free up more housing supply for people who are seeking, right now, who are competing both low and moderate income. So right now, if you have an undersupply of housing in any particular area, you may have both lower income and moderate income households competing for the same property. That drives up the costs, that drives up the rent payments or the mortgage payments, depending on what the situation is. By investing in either end, whether you're investing in the affordable housing for lower income Kansans, or whether you're investing in moderate income housing on the other end, you're adding more housing supply, you're freeing up competition for the same finite number of units, and you're ultimately keeping rent and mortgage costs down, which is really a win-win from either side.
Representative Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so, and I have obviously a specific line of questioning I'm going through here because I remember, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, we were shown, oh, we spent $600,000 on a house, and I was mortified to see that because I don't think our tax dollars should be going up. So my line of questioning is ultimately determine what is the highest price individual residence that tax dollars are used for, and how do we make sure that never happens again?
Ryan.
In response to your specific inquiry, Representative, to my knowledge, I'm not aware of us ever spending $600,000 on a specific single-family home through any of the programs. That would be way out of line, and I'd be happy to follow up if there's additional information. But going back to kind of my conversation with Representative Francis, you know, the benefit of having big resources, but also lots of applications, is that we're able to compare costs. So if we see one particular home, or if we see one particular development way out of whack, that's the beauty that we bring, having the experience and the knowledge and the partners from running these programs over the years to not fund that development or application.
Representative Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm sorry, I should have been more clear. It wasn't you guys, but it was another housing authority, and I don't remember which community it was, but I was very shocked by that number. And since then, I've tried to be very vigilant that I think their premise was you create more middle-income housing by allowing some middle-income people to move up. But if you can afford a $600,000 house, I want to be very confident that our tax dollars are not part of that story.
No, agreed, and can guarantee you that we're not financing that level of housing.
Thank you.
Well, and kind of going off of Representative Estes' question, and kind of generate something, or a thought, I guess, is more not really a question. So I used to live in a community that was less than 200 people. And of course, there are trends that are happening with the housing segment as well. And this is kind of compounding it. So this community is very close to a lake. And so people are building larger homes around the lake because the land is now opened up and people are selling the land for housing development. But in this community, like when I lived there, I thought when I was selling my house, it would take a year to 18 months for me to sell it. I never had to list it with a realtor, and I had a showing by myself and sold it within 30 days. That's the demand that the lake is generating as far as housing in this community, and also in this community of less than 200 people. At this moment, they currently do not have one property for sale because you have individuals who want to have a property close to the lake but don't want to spend the exorbitant cost of building a home out there, or you have out-of-state hunters who are buying up homes, and they're not actually living in the community, but they come here periodically during the hunting seasons, and it's actually more advantageous for them to buy a home as opposed to trying to secure a hotel or VRBO or whatever the case may be. And so that's one thing that is, like I said, it's a trend right now in my area, especially in my home county. But I'm just wondering how the Housing Resource Corporation can build the stock of homes when we're having these multiple trends going on in regards to the housing market. I don't really pose a question, a thought.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance, and some of it is just knowing the specific needs of each area. We've heard that from Stockton and from Norton and some of those different communities that, you have these hunters coming in and they spend their money and they pay their taxes, but they're only there a couple weeks out of the year, and that may be taking up a very limited stock of housing that's available to other year-round for other families. We also have some communities we know of, maybe it's rural America, that has, a couple of elderly people or a single elderly person living in a great big home that would probably be better utilized by a larger family, and when there's not enough family housing available. And sometimes it takes unique and creative methods to address that. We know that Norton actually gave an incentive to seniors in their community to downsize, to move maybe into an affordable senior property that maybe meets their accessibility needs, allows them to age in place, but it also frees up that larger single-family home for families. So it takes partnerships with local communities, the state, employers. Everybody's got to think differently about how to address the state's housing needs.
All right, thank you. Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, before we got off on the central planning of telling people where they need to be living and what they can be using their property for, I just had a little quip. However, my humor has been dampened by that conversation. But I was curious if you were, as the chair, recommending rather than building houses, building lakes. To draw people to build houses around the lake.
Well, that also takes additional staff by the wildlife parks, and so that'd be an extra cost if we built more lakes. Final question or comment, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing me a second time at this. Okay, so at what point does the government stop or distorts markets and increases inflated costs for housing? And I say that because since your report here shows that since 2021-22, we have spent in the state of Kansas probably upwards with the KHITC that we recently killed in the House, approximately just in that time frame, $180 million. So, and then you look at Australia that spent $20 billion, and now all economists say that they have added to the inflated cost of housing there. That's 4 times the cost in the United States. So at what point does government need to step out of the way and quit inflating prices and distorting natural markets? Because right now, it seems like we have an insatiable appetite for incentives. And I'm just wondering if you guys have conversations about what's too much, what's enough, and are we distorting markets?
Ryan.
That is an excellent question, and it's a very philosophical question, and it's a question that's best set for policymakers, you all. But I will ask you in return, Representative, whether you feel like the housing needs of our communities are being met now without the government investment. I can point to the difference that we've been able to make through the investments that you all have charged us with the last couple of years, and the amount of new investments that we've made in new homes to be able to expand jobs and revitalize neighborhoods and rebuild our communities. I know of many, many Kansas communities that have not had new homes built, or even whether it's apartments, whether it's single-family homes, in generations. And that has changed because of your investments. I personally am very grateful for it. Again, I don't envy the jobs that you all have to do to decide between scarce resources, but I can assure you that any resources you give us will be well used, will be effective, and will be efficient. And I thank you for the charge that you give us in your partnership.
All right, and thank you, Ryan, for being here. And we did go a little past 10:30 when you had asked how long do you have, and I think you can thank Rachel for you getting all the hot seat at the very end. All right, committee, we are going to go ahead and adjourn, and we'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.